Okay, so we're back. This is part two. And so my dad was talking about how he started to get more serious.
Okay, you ready? Yeah.
Ready.
So anyway, last 2 years got much more serious. Went to class, did took copious notes from the professors and the instructors, and tried to do my studies. As I wasn't as successful at that as I should have been. I should have studied more, but it's hard to do in college in the evening for some people like me. But anyway, the last 2 years was much more successful whenever I got serious and prioritized. During the last 2 years, I only got one C, and the previous 2 years, the majority of my grades were C's. The first 2 years of college, I only got 4 A's, and all 4 of those were in ROTC. I did not get an A in any of the academic classes. My last 2 years, I got 14 A's. And I raised my grade point average up to 2.99, which still upsets me a little bit because it should have been a 3.0 if my geography teacher had just drawn the A and B line down one more person, because I had the highest B. If he had given me that A, because I was closer to the last A than I was to the next B student in class. But he didn't draw the line there. And so I got a B in that class, and my grade point average finished with 2.99. Okay, other challenges I faced. One was I got married about 6 months after college, after I'd finished the officer basic course, airborne school, jumping out of airplanes, and going to Ranger School, which is like the elite training program for Army, similar to the SEAL training in the Navy that some of you might have heard about. So anyway, I finished those 3 schools, came back and got married. We went down to Fort Hood, went 4.5 years at Fort Hood with just my wife. After that assignment, we went to Fort Benning and had our first child, Misty, our oldest daughter. And then a couple of years after that, we went to North Carolina to go to graduate school. And we had our second child, Carrie. And at that point, I had to grow up and mature a lot more than I had been prior to that. So now I had a wife and 2 kids, and that was the challenge I faced. And the way I managed that was a number of things. Just to share with you, at Fort Hood, when I was a second lieutenant, I smoked cigarettes, not a whole lot, maybe a pack a week. And usually just to keep me awake, because we were in the field a lot doing training, and we usually did not get much sleep. So anyway, I smoked cigarettes. But when my first daughter was born, I said, hey, I'm not going to have smoke in the house, and I'm not going to smoke around my kids and that sort of thing. So I quit cold turkey right then. The other things I had to do was I had to support the family financially, emotionally. I had to love my wife and my kids. I had to play. I had to, help them develop through being a good role model as best I could. I was responsible for their well-being, taking care of them and that sort of thing, and responsible for raising my daughters, even though I can tell you I probably did not do very much of that. My wife did much more of that. I think I was more of the playful one, and enjoyed playing with them a whole lot more than disciplining or teaching and that sort of thing. Everything that goes into raising kids. Okay, so that was another challenge, having the family and growing up and becoming more mature. Another challenge I had was just being in the Army, because as a infantry officer, I was in charge of men, and I was responsible for them. I was responsible for accomplishing the mission. I was responsible for taking care of those who were assigned to my unit, taking care of their well-being, and so I had to mature in that way, similar to the way I had to mature with a family. And in the Army, we always say that there's 2 things, taking care of people and accomplishing the mission. And we always said, in the infantry anyway, that, hey, the mission comes first. You have to accomplish the mission. But the way I spun that around is, if I can recall how I had put this, mission first, people always. So the people are always important, and you have to take care of the people, or else you're probably not going to accomplish the mission. But anyway, those are some of the challenges I faced, and that's how I addressed them.
Okay, let's go on to that third question. So the third question is, what did you learn from your childhood that affected that middle part of your life?
Okay, well, I think a lot of the things I probably already covered in the first two questions, but I'll just highlight some of the other things that I think were in play here. One was I learned discipline as a child. That did carry into my midlife. That I had learned right from wrong. I think both of my parents taught me that, especially my father, and that carried into my young adulthood years. I think I learned to be task-oriented. It was probably part of my personality to begin with, and then reinforced because my dad was very task-oriented as well. And we got rewarded for that with kind words and him being supportive and that sort of thing. I think I probably also learned to be honest, which I think is important for everybody. And I think that carried over into my midlife, and to treat others with respect. Some of the other things I learned, one would be to work hard, something that probably, I was doing this as a child. I was working hard as a child. For example, I had a paper route in Hawaii that required me to get up like at 4:30, 7 days a week, in order to deliver these papers on my bicycle, and then get home in time to eat breakfast and clean up and go to school during the academic year. So that's all part of working hard, and that then carried over into my midlife as well. Something else I learned early in life was to play hard. I had three brothers and one sister, but the three brothers and I would compete a lot. I know my younger brother, who I mentioned in the first interview, who played shortstop on that baseball team, he was a very good athlete. Certainly a better athlete than I was, but we competed. And since he was a better athlete, and although 3 years younger, he was still very competitive and would win as many times as I did. But we would always play hard. We would play fair, but we would play hard. Okay? And probably could be seen as a negative by a lot of people. Not only did we play hard and try to win, we probably put too much emphasis on winning, just because we were so competitive, And some people might see that as something negative or as a disadvantage. I didn't back then as a kid, and I didn't in midlife either. Competing and winning was what a lot of it was all about. Okay?
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you a few more questions just thrown in here at the end.
Good.
So tell me about, when did you meet your wife?
When did I meet her? I met my wife in October of 1973.
And where were you guys? Tell me a little bit about that.
She was a sophomore in college, and I was a senior in college. And I lived in Yoakum Hall on campus, and she lived in Humphreys Hall. But we ate at the same place. We ate at the cafeteria called Bruff Commons. And I was sitting there eating one time, and I saw her come in, and I saw her go up to a table with some other girls that I knew. And so later that night, I called one of the girls I knew, and I asked what was her name and whatnot. And she gave me the name and the phone number. And then later that night, I called her and set up our first date.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Okay.
Yes.
And then when did you guys get married?
We got married on December 21st, 1974, which was about a year and 2 months later.
It overheated at the perfect